written over 30, published 21, a brand new book out in December, which we'll get into. They're missing a little bit of the story. So obviously, the only way you're able to do that is because you have very good productivity skills. What metrics are you looking at when you know you've been had a productive day?
I am daily and I measure it by words, meaning there are times when I'm done writing in 30 minutes and there are times when I'm done writing in a couple hours. I've written 1,000 words a day ever since I was in seventh grade. I've done so through a concussion, through being extremely sick, because it's been so many years. It's very much just this muscle memory. Just this is what I do. Yeah, occasionally I'll have times where I'll finish the 1,000 words in 30 minutes to an hour because just the ideas are flowing. I know what I'm supposed to write. And I'll have times take me 2 hours because maybe what I'm writing is more complex. Right now, with the book I'm writing, there's a whole lot of just really complicated plotting going on. And I feel like I'm untying all of these knots. So it's taking me maybe a solid 2 hours of just sitting down at a coffee shop to really get my 1,000 words in.
You just brought up a great point. In my books, I talk about changing locations to be creative. So, you and I both know there's the creative mind and there's the editing mind, and we can't let those two people in our brain at the same time. We either have to be in our creative flow or we looking at our work and we're making corrections. So sometimes I say, have a place where you write and have a place where you edit. So do you kind of geolocate, separate your behavior by location as well?
Actually, I've never thought of it like that, but I do because typically there are some exceptions because just depending on the book. With the book I just published, I had a moment where I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna do my 1,000 words and then I'm gonna edit some chapters. But usually I am at home when I edit, mainly because that's where I do Zoom calls with my editor. But I'm always pretty much writing outside of the house. It depends. Occasionally, I'll write in this room right here, but for the most part, I'm going to coffee shops, I'm going to cafes, I'm sitting down with a drink and just getting the words in and then going home.
Are you just faced completely on, so I assume are you writing on paper or are you typing with a pad?
I'm typing.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Because, I talk about that, all the different, different ways you can do it. So is there any people watching going on that helps with character development, or there's really a couple of different strategies? So me, for some reason, if I go into an environment that's very busy, I can still write, but I'm tuning everything out and the noise and the bustle are almost like background music in a way. So it's this droning sound, but I'm not, because I'm a business writer and I'm nuts and bolts. I'm not doing observational. So how much are you sitting there watching people creating backstories and plot lines, and eventually somebody who came in for a latte is going to end up, some version of them is going to end up in a book as a character?
It's definitely a very subtle process. I'm not sitting down and actively thinking of, ooh, I wonder if I could put this person in my book, or I wonder what's going on. Rather, working in coffee shops, I get to witness all kinds of crazy interactions and I get to overhear interesting conversations. And then I think subconsciously that ends up getting worked into what I'm writing.
I discovered is because I was kind of mimicking behavior. I was having to watch people to figure out what to do, because obviously what I was doing was very different and creating too much attention towards myself that I didn't want. And so it caused me to have these observational skills that other people don't have. So do you have any skills like that, or do you use anything like that in your work?
Yeah, I'm definitely very observational in real life. And I think that definitely sort of goes into writing these characters. And occasionally, the really funny thing is that my characters in my books absolutely overthink a whole lot, especially with the book I'm writing right now, where I've had these multiple paragraphs of the character analyzing the other character's behavior. And I'm like, wait, I don't know if anyone's going to want to read this other than me.
Are there plot lines or characters that you get into and then you drop them? What causing you to, in other words, why would you give up on a plot line, or why would you give up on a character? When you reach a certain point and you say to yourself, you know what, this isn't working. What's triggering in your mind when you're kind of abandoning projects or plot lines?
So I don't necessarily abandon full projects. That said, I've absolutely had certain ideas within the book, and maybe I've started them, maybe I haven't. And ultimately, I've just realized it doesn't really fit my end goal. It might be really exciting to write, but everything else I'm kind of building around the story doesn't really fit. Occasionally, what will happen is I'll have this idea. of how the character is going to behave in this situation, maybe, or how this is going to play out. But then everything around it, as I'm writing, I start realizing, wait, in order maybe for these characters to have a deeper bond, I need this to happen a little bit more naturally. I need this thing to happen and this thing to happen. But then that will end up getting rid of this other thing that I thought of. So really, it all comes down to how this puzzle piece fits with the greater story and whether or not it's going to benefit it or whether or not it's going to be something that might be fun to write, but also maybe won't really fit in this story. That doesn't mean it's gone forever because I've pulled ideas and characters and I put them in other books before.
Your latest book, which congratulations on that, by the way, it's number one. I had the category memorized and I just wiped it out, but it is a number one new release. And yeah, I looked on Amazon. It's Did I see that right? 804 pages.
Yeah.
If you hold it up, that's fantastic. Yeah, good kids, bad choices. And also, oh, at the top for change and on the back as well. So, the, meant to ask you too about your covers, and we're going to jump all over the place, but your covers are phenomenal. I really feel like that's probably the number one thing authors get wrong. That's just my opinion. First of all, when did you figure out how important having a good cover was? And second, how are you producing such great covers? Because yours are really amazing. You're definitely doing that right.
Thanks. Yeah, it was definitely I don't want to say instant, but it was a very quick realization. So, with the first novel I ever wrote, that was my first serious book where I was like, I want people to read this. I want this to be a big deal. I mean, I was while writing this book, I had this whole idea that this was the next great American novel. Anyways, as I was writing, I did so much research, whether it was going on Google and researching book marketing or publishing or author experiences. I think I Googled, what is it like to be a famous author at one point? And that was part of my research. But another thing I did was I really looked closely at all of my favorite books because my number one motivator was the fact that lying around my house, I had so many books and this is exactly what I wanted to produce. I also realized I can't do this myself. I I've actually gotten quite good at graphic design through the fact that I've had to make countless social media graphics. A couple of my book covers I have designed, but for the most part, I think it's really important to hire a professional cover designer if you can, because they have that
Right.
insight into this genre. They know what's trending, they know what does well, and also they just totally know what works visually much better than I do,
Sure.
because the first time I ever designed a cover, there was so much going on at once. It was bad.
I went to Miblart, and I'm going to shoot a whole other video separately about that. Did you use a big service or somebody privately? How did you find your person? Now you've published so many books. I'm sure you've even tried several services.
Yeah, I have a couple different designers just depending on the genre. Actually, probably at least the designer that I've used the most is Miblart.
Miblart.
Um,
Okay, great.
yeah.
So without giving your details, so won't get into your numbers, but people out there that are authors, how much do you think they should expect to spend for at least something that's going to give their book a shot to get purchased on Amazon as far as the investment, the cost of a good cover?
All right. I'd say on average. So there are tons of cover designers out there that offer really amazing covers that are quite expensive. For me, on average, I'd say it's around $300, which I've definitely spent more on book covers. I've definitely spent less. Really, I think it's such an important investment because this is also how people, in a way, assess the quality of your work. Because you can have this amazing, beautiful, well thought out book, but if the book cover is maybe just not that great, then people will just subtly associate your book with the cover and think that maybe the writing in your book also isn't as professional. So I think it's such an important investment. But yeah, I'd say on average $300, maybe in the 300 to 500 range. But also overall, I believe if I did the math, it's probably closer to 300 or below.
That's a good number. And of course, with Miblart, what they can do is because the cover size, a lot of people don't know this, but the cover size for your audio book is different. So Audible or CX uses a square image. And, obviously your book, I'm in the business genre. So I'm pretty much everything I'm going to produce is going to be 5.5 by 8.5. So that's going to be the same, but I think the Kindle formatting size is different. So, unless you're really good at resizing your own stuff, you're going to need a designer to give you several iterations, several different sizes for that same thing. And plus has these great add-ons. I went gonzo this last time and I had them create some social media banners and things because why not? And it was not much money and they produced a whole lot more work. I definitely think it was better than the cover that I got previously from Upwork, even though that person did a really great job. But the difference between the two was on Upwork, I was having to provide the inspiration, and I'm not a cover designer. I don't know what people are looking for, and that's all they do. That's what I love about them. And obviously, your book covers are fantastic, so it gives them a great opportunity. So now, next question, sort of related to that. What have you found is the best way to get reviews for your book right after you publish? So you just published in December, you've already got a big stack of reviews, but for somebody publishing their first book, they're a complete unknown. How can they get those reviews for that first book? Because I know I look at that right before I buy a book. I look at the cover,
Oh,
the
yeah.
description, and what are other people saying about it?
I would say there is nothing that I think I value more than reviews. That's how I actually assess the popularity of my books rather than the sales, is how many reviews it has. So for me, what I do is I have this ARC reader program. And essentially, I guess the first thing you need to do is just start posting a whole lot on social media, really build your platform. You don't have to have a crazy following. You just have to be able to connect with people. And also you can go on Facebook groups and basically offer a free advanced copy of your book, digital, in exchange for an honest review. And in the past, I've had several hundred people sign up. On the other hand, I've had times, particularly with my most recent book, I had a smaller pool of readers because it is an 800-page novel. And that is not something that I'd want people to sign up for if they didn't think they could commit to it. Yeah, just being able to sort of reach a bunch of people who are interested and who will sign up. And then you send out the email, send the book. And I typically to keep in touch every week or so just to ask how it's going, because then often I can have these really nice interactions with my readers. We can actually have conversations. I can answer questions and I can get that really early feedback that lets me know, okay, this book's in a good place. It's going to be okay. But all of that for the most part, and I've tried services, but for the most part, that's just me posting a ton on different Facebook groups, on Goodreads threads, on Instagram and TikTok. But it does really pay off. And there are so many people, if you use the right hashtags, who are just going to find it and be really interested in reading the book because everyone loves books.
I'm surprised, first and foremost, that Amazon even allows reviews if you're not a verified purchaser of the book. That really shocked me when I realized that. The other thing, too, you mentioned a reader. Now, I don't know off the top of my head what that means, but I do know that there are services very similar to what you're talking about. I know there are authors that have purchased that. How do you feel about that? So first of all, let me know what an ARC reader is and how that fits into these services where you can quote unquote pay for reviews. And I've been told you have to be careful with that, but it is
Yeah,
possible.
you definitely have to be super careful with that. An ARC reader is just an advanced reader copy. So it's
Oh,
typically the
okay.
group of readers that get the book early and leave honest reviews. I've definitely heard a bit about certain services and just being a little bit sketchy because Amazon very much doesn't want reviews that are paid. They don't want reviews that are sort of dishonest. So, as long as a lot of the readers they'll state in their review that they received the book in exchange for an honest review, typically it's okay. I believe it's if you're getting 1,000 reviews at once or several hundred reviews at once and
Sure.
they're all insanely positive and then the sales aren't really adding up, that I think Amazon might flag it.
Right.
But the services, for the most part, if you can find a service that's trusted, and there are definitely some off the top of my head, I've used Book Sirens before
I've heard of that.
that,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. They're a competitor to Pubby, slightly different way that they reach, but yeah, very
yeah.
similar. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the services typically they're trustworthy as long as they have good author outcomes, and there are tons of resources on different publishing forums about whether or not these services work, whether they're going to get you any reviews, and whether or not the reviews are going to be high quality and honest, or whether or not it's going to get your Amazon account flagged. So just as long as you do really careful research, you should be okay.
And so we've hit the really major things, right? A good title doesn't hurt, but definitely a gorgeous cover, a good book description to entice people to read it, and then you want reviews on there. And then if you have all of that, possibly the sales may take care of itself. Now, as far as promotion, do you now the only thing I've read that really works as far as the highest return on investment to sell a book online is to buy Amazon ads. Everything else that I've analyzed as far as the back end data, the true sales data, nothing comes even close. Now, of course, there's organic strategies and there's other things you can do, but you, obviously with the ARC reader and the reviews, you have a very organic approach there. What is the marketing approach? Is it ads? Is it what's work? In other words, let me just ask it this way. What's working for you?
Ooh, okay, so a lot of the time, this is going to sound so silly, it is trying to get as many copies in the hands of readers, whether or not I'm getting a return on the money. And the reason for that is because if you can get enough people talking about the book, reviewing it, telling their friends, even just, if you can get enough of those discounted sales. So I do a lot of promotions where the book is discounted, or even if the ebook is free. But then as the reviews increase, so does the average level of sales. I will say also, I've had a really great time and I have really gotten a nice return on investment in doing events in person
Oh,
because there's something about sitting in the bookstore and just talking to readers that really makes them want to buy your book. And I also do a lot of festivals. And the thing that's really, really cool about that, and I think that's almost equally as important as the actual sale itself, is that I can really get this clear picture of who my readers are. I now know it's really weird, but I can kind of know, these are the people that read my books. These are the people that have bought my books in person, that I've talked to about them, that have, maybe returned to the same event a year later. And so now I have this clear picture of the people that I want to advertise to. I've also done a lot on social media. That's been amazing, particularly TikTok. And I think the reason, especially, is because I'm a teenager. I write books for teenagers, and there is no app that is more dominated by teenagers than TikTok. And with that, I can really just directly reach my audience and make videos that are
sure.
silly and trendy, and yet are exactly what someone my age would post, and that are also promoting my book to people who are also my age.
So when you're promoting on TikTok, is that the same as what people, because TikTok, obviously, I'm a Facebook. I actually just closed my Facebook and I'm honed completely into LinkedIn because those are my people. That's my audience. YouTube really and LinkedIn. But is your activity on TikTok the same as what they would call book talk, or is that a sub or a completely different subset of TikTok?
Oh no, it is definitely very much what I do. I joined TikTok, right? So I joined TikTok when I guess it was the summer before eighth grade. I'd had a TikTok account well before that. I created my writing account when I was 13. But I'd been observing these trends. And this was around the time when book talk turned into just a silly group of readers to actually this huge business thing where people are having conventions related to book talk, where it's ascending just this online community. And it's been really interesting seeing it adapt. At the core, book talk is just the circle of the internet that talks about books. It's a little bit more abstract. It's not this concrete community. And ultimately, it started as a hashtag about book TikTok.
We get on the internet to be entertained or distracted. So how do you maximize TikTok without having to be too salesy?
Yeah, I try to make videos that are maybe almost entertaining about my book in the sense that I'll make a video and the video is me just sharing these characters. Because if I find that people can connect with the characters in my book, then they'll definitely be more interested in reading it. Another one that I just recently posted that did well was these are just things my book includes. Other times, it's not even talking about a specific book as much as it is sharing my story or sharing writing tips. And if they'll follow me because, oh, they think my story is interesting, or maybe they say, hey, the writing tips I share, then that's still a follow in which now someone is aware of my books. And if they like my videos enough, then maybe they'll go and buy one. It's also just following trends, but using my books. So I've definitely followed a lot of book talk trends where I've used myself instead of maybe books that are important to me that I didn't write. I'll use books I wrote. And it's also being vulnerable in talking, for example, about how, hey, I have this new book coming out. I'm kind of scared to publish it. But that really lets people know that I'm human because I think on the internet also that's definitely something that's a bit of a struggle for people to understand. So then really just being vulnerable and showing just every step of the process.
That makes sense. You said something brilliant in a previous interview that I didn't even think about because I had already looked and I thought, my goodness, 804 pages. This is, this is a massive book. And I was honestly, and I'm not a hardcore environmentalist. I'm an avid fisher, so I'm out in nature a lot. And, I don't like the plastic floating around and, all that stuff bothers me. But I was thinking about, how many trees go into books. And I think on an interview, you were saying you really push the digital. And I thought, yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, there's absolutely, other than it being on a hard drive somewhere, with some electricity going to it, there's no environmental impact. Because I love audiobooks. I'd say 95% of my consumption is audiobooks. If somebody sends me a written book, there's a very low chance that I'm going to read it. And Kindle, I'm not crazy on either. But either way, audio or Kindle, these digital formats, virtually zero impact. There's no printing cost. There's no inks that go into it. And when you mentioned that, it's funny, as much as I think about writing, it never hit me. And I thought, yeah, I really probably should spend more time being responsible and pushing the digital version. So thank you for waking my brain up to that. Something else I wanted to ask, a lot of people that I know that are very skilled in one area, a writer or musicians, a lot of them tend, if they have especially really strong skills in one area like you do, they always want to aspire to something else. So a famous example was Jim Morrison from The Doors, one of the most famous lead men in rock and roll history. He wanted to be a poet. He really didn't want anything to do with rock and roll. So do you have that sometimes too, where obviously you're really in your wheelhouse as a writer, but do you want to be an actress? Do you want to be a screenwriter? Do you have something that's completely different that you have big aspirations for?
Ooh, good question. I mean, okay, overall, in terms of writing, I want to do it all. I love playwriting, I love screenwriting, I love poetry. I think it would be definitely really cool to see something that I've written be on the big screen. The way I see it is I think it's much more likely one of my books rather than I don't necessarily I kind of do, but as a main career, I don't really see myself in the writer's room. I was going to say that I don't collaboration, which is not true. I do love collaborating with people. When it comes to writing, I do really working with by myself first. Yeah, I really, in terms of writing, I love every single field possible. I love creating stories. I also completely different, on a completely different side, I really love animals. And I think it's not out of the question that my main career, because writing is the only thing I can imagine myself doing as a career. I have no plan B. I really love animals, and I think it would be really cool, whether it is somehow through writing, kind of I've already done, or whether it is maybe opening some kind of nonprofit or maybe having an animal sanctuary when I'm older. I would love to rescue animals.
Well, most of the really famous writers I know, they either live in a really swank condo in New York or LA, or they have a big ranch somewhere. So, every writer ends up in one of those two. So you're going to fall into the ranch, because you can have all these great
Yeah,
animals. It's
I will say I love the city. I can't imagine
okay.
not living in a city. I think I might end up being the person who has a very quirky house. I'm from LA, so I'd love to move back to it has a ton of animals.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, LA. And there's so many. So I think it's Stephen Pressfield where he talks about, and I dealt with it too. I had a recording studio in the late 90s and I was in San Antonio. And San Antonio is still to this day unusually large for rock and roll. So bands that couldn't pack anywhere in any other city that are from the 1980s can go down and pack a very large venue in San Antonio. So it has this unique market. But even then, artists weren't breaking out of there. So if you wanted to break out, you had to go to New York or LA. And if you're a country artist, you have to go to Nashville. So there's really nowhere else. Hard to be in Orlando, Florida, for instance, and get signed and put yourself out there. And writers, that's pretty much New York City, maybe Chicago and Los Angeles. So do you agree with that assessment that sometimes location will help your career? If you want to be an actor or actress, LA would probably be your only choice, maybe Atlanta. But for people thinking about that, how important is location for writers?
I'd say it was definitely more of a thing a couple years ago, maybe a decade ago, 2 decades, 3 decades ago, because now everything is so virtual that I don't necessarily think it matters too much. Although it is very nice to get to go. I love going to the LA Festival of Books. I love going to all these events and meeting people. I live in San Diego now. We have a good amount of events. I'm actually moving to Philadelphia for college, and I think that there are plenty of cities that have these really great literary scenes, and that can help you. Philadelphia is one of them, Boston, obviously New York. I live in San Diego right now. I don't we do have a pretty strong literary scene, but I'm really excited for the East Coast proximity to New York and just all of those opportunities that come with those cities being close together and also the amount of history those cities have.
That's a very high population in a very small area, much more so than the West Coast. So even my podcast, I think in terms of things on the East Coast because I'm catching the most people. So a lot of these interviews that I'm doing, the 30-minute lives, I'm actually going to start pushing them a little earlier because right now we're probably getting more exposure, or maybe the lunchtime and mountain time, or maybe West Coast. But if I do noon my time in East Coast, that's prime time live viewing for YouTube. So yeah, location has a lot to do with it. And I knew that we weren't going to get to it anywhere near all of my questions, but if you don't mind, I'm going to scroll through because there were one or two that I'm sure we could hit really quick. And yeah, and I did notice on your profile, and I've said very openly, I'm a member on Podmatch, and I think that's been a great service. And I've met some wonderful people like you. And on your profile, you mentioned bullying, and obviously because of Asperger's and other things, my childhood was different. I didn't get bullied in the classic sense of where anybody was violent or said anything awful to me. I was very fortunate in that regard, but I would get excluded from things. That was more of what I experienced. What is it that you experienced, and why do you think that is? Or did you see it mostly happening to other people?
Yeah, I've definitely just throughout my life experienced different forms of bullying. I've experienced that sort of exclusion, the subtle, oh, we don't want to play with you. And then I've also experienced, the more harsher, also experienced the much more stereotypical version of the terrible things to say, the rumors, and the physical violence. And truly, it's hard for me to know exactly why, but otherwise, it's, I think, because maybe the bully, can see a student that's slightly different, that has the different interests, that ooh is a little bit shy. And then that kind of made me a little bit more of that prime target. Also because I was a really sensitive kid growing up. I got upset about a lot of things. I used to cry when people would step on bugs. So that made definitely for that definitely made me more of that sort of target. But also, I'm really happy to be sensitive and empathetic. I think that's really important.
It is. It is. Well, and I have a friend of mine whose daughter's very advanced for her age, and I was very advanced for my age in some ways. In social ways, I wasn't very advanced, but I was advanced in other ways. So for teenagers that are out there that are getting picked on because of whatever the reason is, what are some strategies you would suggest for them? Because obviously you made it through it. You're very successful, far more successful than a lot of people I know twice your age. So obviously they can look to you as, hey, you made it through, and then you passed up a whole lot of people. There are a lot of people that are 3 times older than you that aren't going to achieve the accolades that you've gotten. So, but what would you say to, let's say, the 14 or 15-year-old out there that's having some trouble?
Okay, first off, I know it feels like that. You're absolutely not alone. There are plenty of people that you can find that have experienced similar things. Maybe not the exact same thing, or maybe, but you can still find people who understand what you're going through, who you can talk to. And kind of relating to that is don't keep it in. Talk to someone, whether it's a parent, family member, a coach, a teacher, an older sibling, family friend, anyone that you trust, talk to, you know, speak up, get help because it's much harder to keep it in and not know what to do. And I think it's also can be helpful to talk to someone who's older. Of course, you can also talk to friends, you can talk to siblings, but if you can find someone who's maybe made it through, who's seen the other side, and that's really helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. I think really good, even from a business perspective, I recommend that, let's say somebody even has a business goal. I say, you don't have to go talk to a billionaire. You just need to talk to the person who's made it one step further than you and figure out how they made that one step further, which is a lot easier. So that's the same thing too. You don't have to necessarily go to somebody who's 20 years older, somebody that's 2 years older. Because you know how it is in grade school. In grade school, if somebody's 2 years older than you, they're ancient. They're a guru, And in high school, it's not much difference there. Somebody 5 years older is so much older. So yeah, you don't have to necessarily talk to somebody's grandparents. Somebody just 2 years older might even have a better perspective. Now, you've got so many books out there. The question I wanted to ask was, if you had two books to pick to introduce people to your content, and you can pick, because I know you're in multiple genres and people have different tastes, but if you could only pick two titles to try to entice people to get into your writing, what two books would you recommend? It, if you don't mind, share the titles and the genre.
Ooh, okay. I was like, I can think of three.
Sure,
First
take
off,
three.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna do three. I have so very short, 100 something, 200 page novella. And it's a really sweet, interesting book about an author who travels back in time to observe her younger self. And despite being just slightly in the science fiction genre, it's pretty contemporary and it has those sort of anti-bullying elements that are really prevalent in my book without being very heavy and hard to read. Another book, Pontus and Electra to the Depths of the Sea, it was book number 21, and it is this very sort of whimsical but kind of sad and still slightly existential novel told in poetry about sharks that sort of highlights the sort of environmentalism and that sort of commentary on social issues. And then if you're interested in getting in to the sort of other side of my book, which is the super fun sci-fi fantasy that also does have a whole lot of real world elements, I'd probably recommend Little Green Man. It is a book about a girl who is hunting aliens in her small town and accidentally unravels this giant conspiracy, and it is a whole lot of fun. It's one of those books that's easy to get through. And I mean, I also recommend Good Kids, Bad Choices. That is the 800-page book. That's number 22. That said, that book is definitely a large commitment. So,
So that's actually the 22nd book. I thought this
uh,
most recent release was 21, but it's actually 22. Is that right?
yeah.
Wow. Did you go, just a quick follow up on the cover, did you go back later and have any of the covers updated, or have you gone back and done any major revisions of your past work?
I have. So for which is that was book 5. I originally, just because that was such a personal project for me, and that was a project that I really didn't intend on doing well. I just wanted to publish it, to put it out there because I was 13. So originally, I designed the cover myself, and a couple months later, I was like, you know what? This book is actually starting traction. I'm going to get a new cover designed. For this book, actually had a very interesting run where initially I released it as a chapter by chapter book on Patreon, and I had a different cover on Patreon, but I just decided that to do a rebrand to make it more exciting, to sort of show the difference between the Patreon version and then the full actually published worldwide version. I had a new cover.
I'm going to put that down because hopefully we can get you in for a full 1 hour pre-recorded. Then, I can go back and, because there's so many more questions and you just opened up a whole box, but I want to be respectful of your time. But I love the Patreon angle. I love really kind of marketing and creative ways of getting your work out there. And you're just really in tune with how to do that. So I think that's fantastic. Was there any questions you wish I had asked?
I mean, we covered a lot, so I don't think so.
Well, if you don't mind, can you hold up your book again so everybody can see that? I do have your link to your site already in here, but yeah, Good Kids, Bad Choices. And it's the number one new release in, I think it was teens, and it was a second category that I didn't memorize. So it's rocking. I mean, despite the size, which isn't intimidating to me, by the way, but that's fantastic. Yeah. And it's doing good. It's got tons of positive reviews just since December. I mean, January. We're barely in January, and you've already got, I think, 47 reviews, if my memory serves me correct.
Oh yeah, wait. I'm trying to remember which book because I don't think The Choices has 47 reviews.
Oh, it doesn't? Okay, maybe not. Let me take a quick
I'm
look.
trying to remember which book it does. I think that's Electra to this on Goodreads
I
has
see.
around 47.
And is all of your, oh, you're absolutely right. What do you think is how much of your, I would say, I guess the sales platform is Amazon versus, because again, we can deeper into that in a completely separate podcast, but I'm 100% Amazon, but I know you probably are on Noble and other places. So in other
Like
words, let's just go with sales volume. Is it mostly Amazon?
99% Amazon.
99. Wow. Okay. So you
It's
just confirmed my strategy. I don't need to go anywhere else.
Yeah,
Not a,
it's the books are available in other places, but I believe the vast majority of them are Amazon.
Thank you so much. I just think this is fantastic. I know you're already working on something else, so I'll be looking for that one as well.